Alrighty then, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 2 of Coin versus Coin. This is only the second ever episode of Coin versus Coin. The first one was EOS versus Tron in the area of decentralized storage. Today it's Bitcoin versus EOS in the category of mining, and decentralization thereof. So during my meditation yesterday, I downloaded the outline for this episode from the Cosmic Computer, and then I spent 3 hours today structuring it into a format that I could actually communicate to you. It's just the way it tends to go. So we are live on YouTube right now. Lovely job. So let's get into it. I have 4 slides for you in presentation format, and then I have yet another brand new shiny systems model modeling the EOS mining system and the BTC mining system, and that'll help me communicate these ideas to you effectively. So, beginning with the presentation. This presentation is only 4 slides. I've called it Hardware Requirements Go Up, Number of Candidates Goes Down, Decentralization, and Performance seem so far to be at odds with each other. So let's get into what that means. So here we go. I've had to break this diagram up into pieces so I can walk you through it in story format. So this is actually a graph. Along the bottom, from left to right, we're going to have hardware requirements to participate in the mining of Bitcoin and EOS. And also, as it goes from left to right, it increases in complexity. So there's the blue arrow, increasing in a linear fashion from left to right. It might not be linear, but I'm simplifying it for the sake of communication. And then down the side here, the y-axis, we have in red the number of nodes or the number of unique candidates that could be miners for Bitcoin or EOS. And as you would imagine, in my world, in my view, as that hardware requirement increases, as the complexity of the work increases, the number of nodes that will be on the network and the unique number of candidates that could even possibly adhere to those requirements decreases. So that's why I said on the opening slide there's sort of an inverse relationship between complexity and the number of people that can handle that complexity, right? Because it takes more and more skill, and there are, higher up the skill level you go, the fewer people can exhibit those skill levels. So if we planted our project right here, and we called this Bitcoin, that would mean that right here, where Bitcoin crosses the number of nodes mark, it's quite high, because many people can just download the Kudo miner software and press go. Right? That's how complex it is to mine on Bitcoin. And then the other thing is that the actual hardware requirements and the complexity is pretty low. All you need to do is buy an Antminer online, plug it in, and get your Kudo miner software up and running, and Bob's your uncle. So quite low complexity, and therefore and quite easy to use with simple mining software. So that's how come Bitcoin crosses the red line quite high up. It has a lot of nodes and a lot of unique candidates, and the barrier to entry, if you like, is quite low, which means lots of people have the opportunity to be Bitcoin miners and Bitcoin nodes. Never mind nodes, we're sort of talking specifically about mining in this particular episode. So now let's plot another bar further down the hardware requirement and complexity scale, and we'll call this one EOS. So what I'm saying here is that EOS has much higher hardware requirements, and the complexity of running an EOS miner or a block producer is much higher. That's why it crosses the blue arrow much further up. And also, as you'd imagine, EOS intersects the red number of nodes and the unique candidates arrow where it's a lot lower. So what do we mean by this? The fact that EOS crosses the blue line here means the technical infrastructure for EOS in order to run a block producer is more complex, right? It requires real high-level network infrastructure expertise in web hosting and redundancy and all manner of things like that. It's way more complex than downloading a copy of NiceHash or Kudo miner software and pressing go. And because of that, the EOS line crosses the red line here much lower, because the number of people that have the finances, then the know-how, and can handle the complexity of running an EOS block producer there are far fewer people that can adhere to those requirements. And that's why, the red line is much lower when it hits EOS. So there we go. That's the design decisions of the two systems. So EOS actually did this on purpose. The designers of EOS, they did this on purpose. They very specifically, set the minimum hardware requirements quite high. And that was in order to improve scalability. But we'll get onto that in a second. So what are the consequences of these design decisions? That is the very next slide we're going to look at. So very simple table here. Bitcoin down the left, EOS down the right column. So the consequences of these design decisions are Bitcoin ends up having the possibility of doing about 9 transactions a second right now. And I calculated that based on number of transactions in the last 24 hours according to blocktivity.info. Contrast that with EOS. According to blocktivity.info, in the last 24 hours, EOS did an average of 235 transactions per second to Bitcoin's 9 transactions per second in the last 24 hours, okay? Further to that, moving down, Bitcoin right now, if you look at CoinDance, coin.dance/blocks/this week, it looks back 7 days at the hash rate of the various mining pools in the Bitcoin mining network. And when I looked at it today, we have 14 major mining pools right now. So major mining pool means any mining pool that has like 1% of the hash rate or more. Actually, I think I've included one that has 0.5%. So there are some obscure ones, but for the sake of argument, the ones that are major have more than 0.5%, we'll call a major mining pool. And there are 14 of those right now. EOS, on the other hand, we have 471 block producers, which are sort of the equivalent of mining pools. Pause on that. I've got better diagrams to show you when I get to the systems models as to exactly how that works. But in EOS, only the top 21 are able to produce blocks because they are voted in as official block producers, and they're the only 21 block producers that are able to add to the official chain. And I got that data from blocks.io, blocks.io. Next row down. So Bitcoin operates on a delegated proof of work system. Now, you're going to have to wait for the next slide for me to justify that. And EOS uses a delegated proof of stake system. And then finally, in Bitcoin, miners vote for the pools with their hashes. When I say miners, I'm talking about the individuals that operate the mining operations. So they point their hash rate at their chosen mining pool, and that mining pool then gets the privilege of writing the next block to the blockchain, earning the rewards, and dividing it amongst all of their delegates, all of the individual miners that are pointing their hash power at that mining pool. With EOS, it works similar. So token holders, instead of miners, the token holders vote with their tokens for which block producers should be allowed to write blocks to the blockchain. So this is my first case for calling Bitcoin delegated proof of work and EOS delegated proof of stake. The voters in Bitcoin are the individual miners, and they're voting with their hashes which mining pools should have the power to write to the blockchain. And in EOS, it's the token holders that vote for which block producers are allowed to add to the blockchain. So the mining pools are almost like the block producers. They're having power delegated to them by the people with the real power, which are the real miners with the real hardware and the real hashes. So wait for it. We're going to get to another model. So time for another systems model. We're going to look at the differences between the two mining infrastructure on Bitcoin and EOS. So let's now hop over to the model. Let's click it. Let's get it open here. Let's just give it a load. Here we go. Let's get rid of the sidebar. Let's fit. So let's start with EOS. So this on the left is EOS, and on the right is Bitcoin. And straight away, you can notice that the shapes are very similar. I know we don't like to think of hierarchies in crypto, and there aren't really hierarchies in their networks. But what I like about these, the way I've laid this out, this took me forever to make, by the way, but what I like about this, it shows how networks have these layers to them. And they're not really hierarchies, but you can see that in the center, the blue circle in the center on the left, that's EOS, like the system, and the orange circle in the center on the right, that's like Bitcoin at the center of the network, the technology. and then it has circles, outer circles and outer circles, which I'm going to get into right now. So let's begin with EOS. Let me zoom right in rather. So we have the EOS system, and the first circle of circles, the first circle of elements that surround EOS are the top 21 block producers. Now, I've got them all linked to the EOS system with an arrow. And even though the orange block producers that are in sort of the second circle out, even though they're on sort of the outer circle, they're not really behind the top 21 block producers. They are connected directly to the EOS system. I've just chosen to depict it like this in order to show the distinction between the top 21 block producers who are allowed to write to the blockchain and the backup block producers in orange that are waiting for a spot in the top 21. And the way you get a spot in the top 21 is the very outer circle, which are the purple circles. These are all the token holders. So token holders will use their tokens, as I've mentioned in the previous slides. They will vote for which block producers they want to give to the privilege of writing to the blockchain. So let me just hover over one of these token holders so we can fade the model out. So token holder number 1, say, votes for this block producer number 1, and block producer number 1 is, writing to the EOS blockchain. In this case, it's a green one, which means they're one of the top 21 block producers. They're one of the 21 block producers with the most votes. So as in a cycle, in order, each block producer gets a turn of writing to the blockchain. And the backup block producers in the top 21, well, that can change every few minutes because token holders can change their votes at any minute. And say block producer 27 over here, that's currently in orange because they're a backup block producer. If some of these token holders choose to change their votes, I can do it in real time here. If I get token holder number 3 and I move their vote to the block producer 27 and they get enough votes, well, it would get swapped out like this and they would slide into the top 21 and block producer number 3 here would slide out again. So that's how the delegated proof of stake system works. It's the token holders that have the stake and they delegate it by way of voting with their tokens to one of the block producers. And if that block producer ends up in the top 21 by votes, they get to write to the blockchain. And each of the top 21 gets a turn. It goes in a cycle. Everyone gets a turn of writing to the blockchain. Okay, so that's EOS. So you can see from that, EOS is pretty decentralized in terms of the mining infrastructure, right? Because the block producers don't have any power beyond what token holders give them. And actually this works almost identically in Bitcoin, except it's not Bitcoin token holders that vote, it's miners. So when I say miners, we'll get through to exactly what I mean by that. So here's Bitcoin. So Bitcoin sits in the middle of the system. And instead of being surrounded by 21 block producers, Bitcoin's mining network is first and foremost, it's surrounded by the top 14 Bitcoin mining pools, which in this case I've named them because they don't change much. In EOS, I just called them block producer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 21 because in EOS there are 471 of them, all wanting to be in the top 21 to get those rewards. Okay, so in Bitcoin we have BTC.com, Bitcoin.com, Bitfury, BitClub. You'll see them all if you go to that link on the slide I just showed you at CoinDance. It'll name all of the mining pools and what percentage of the hash power each of them have. Now, they don't actually have any control over that really, unless they own their own mining hardware. But typically pools are they're just like management agencies. And where they get their power from, where they get their mining power, is from the brown circles here, which I'm calling individual miners. So when I call them individual miners here, I'm referencing a unique mining operation or a unique mining company. I'm not talking about the hardware. We'll get to that in a second. Now, we don't really know how many of these there really are, since they're all hidden behind the mining pools that they have delegated their hash rate to. This is why I called it delegated proof of work, because the individual miner who gets their hash power from the ASICs, which we'll get to in a second, they delegate that mining power to the mining pool, and the mining pool then decides what transactions to include in the block, get maximum rewards, and then they divide the mining reward amongst the various individual miners that are working for them, right? So moving out to the outer circle here, this sort of, I don't know what color this is, it's sort of a red circle, isn't it? Around the edge here, we've got the ASICs. These are the individual pieces of mining hardware that anyone can buy, right? You can buy a Antminer S10 now and plug it in, and that's an individual piece of mining machinery. So with that, you get a certain number of hashes. And let me just highlight one of the individual miners here in brown. So this individual miner number 3, as I've called them, who's working for the Bitcoin.com mining pool, they have, say, 2 ASICs or any number of ASICs, we don't know, and they decide to point all their hash power at Bitcoin.com. But that individual miner also has the same amount of freedom to move that hash power, the same amount of freedom as an EOS token holder. So this individual miner number 3 here with his or her 2 ASICs, say, I could just take this arrow and they could say, right, Bitcoin.com, I'm leaving you, and I'm going to point my hash power to BTC.com instead. And then BTC.com gets the benefit of all 3 of these individual miners, and in turn gets the benefit of all of the ASICs that are connected to them. And this can happen to any mining pool, right, at any time. Maybe individual miner 3 decides to go back to Bitcoin.com, and then individual miner 2 decides to switch to Bitcoin.com, right? So this is a really flexible model. So when we zoom right out here, we see that the real power, the real actual mining network, is this great big outer circle of ASICs, all of these little individual mining machines. And this is actually a gross oversimplification, really, because what have I got here? I've probably ended up plotting, took me forever, but 52 ASICs, that's all I've done, is plotted 52 ASICs here that are belonging to like 28 miners that are delegating to 14 mining pools and 1 Bitcoin network. But in reality, we don't really know how many ASIC miners there are out there, but I couldn't possibly model all those out and it make any sense. I think this is good enough. And same with EOS. I mean, this model of Bitcoin looks a lot bigger, but I drew it second, so I got a lot more overzealous with the ASICs. But it's not bigger. They're not to scale, you know. I just kept the purple circles in the EOS model down to, I only plotted 21 token holders, and I've plotted 51 ASICs. So that's it's unfair to compare them on the basis of the complexity of the model. But you can see how they have a similar structure to them, don't they? You know, and EOS actually has 1 layer less than Bitcoin. It has the actual individual miner layer removed, right? So token holders in EOS are the purples. They're equivalent to the ASICs that have hashes as votes rather than tokens as votes. And in EOS, those token votes go to block producers. And in Bitcoin, those token votes go to mining pools, but via, the individual miners. So I suppose what I could have drawn this is have individual EOS tokens represent an ASIC, because one token holder could have, 1 or more EOS tokens, and then it would look very, very similar indeed. So I've got a couple of more notes here, just make sure I've mentioned everything. Bear in mind I've only plotted 42 block producers on the EOS model, when in reality there are currently 471 of them. And in this model I'm only showing token holders for the top 21 block producers, and I'm not showing the actual number of EOS tokens that may be voting for any given block producer. And what else did I say here? We don't know how many ASICs there are. I've said that. Like F2 pool, for example, if we zoom in here, here's F2 pool. F2 pool, it could consist of just 2 unique miners. It could be 1,000 unique miners, or even 100,000 unique miners. And each of those could just have 1 Antminer S10, or 10,000 or 100,000. We just don't know, because it's all obfuscated by the mining pool. So, bottom line, when you see the Bitcoin mining infrastructure laid out like this, you can clearly see why I end up calling Bitcoin delegated proof of work, and then we call EOS delegated proof of stake. So there we jolly well go. I mean, that took me 19 minutes to walk through, but 3 hours to create. So there we jolly well go. I find that fascinating, that you can communicate the ideas so much quicker than you can structure them. So I find that absolutely fascinating. Thanks, Professor Wally, for the $9.99 tip. And Jan, thank you very much for the tip of €5 as well. I very much appreciate that. Thanks. That makes it worthwhile. That does make it worthwhile. But that's all I've got for you today. No point in rambling on. So thanks very much for joining me. If you like this episode, go ahead, hit the old like button. If you really liked it, hit subscribe and hit the bell, will you? Some people are complaining they're not getting notifications. You can also sign up to my email list now, down in the old video description or the pinned comment. That'll be my email list, and then I will send you the email to make damn sure you know when I put out a new video. The other way you can support me is by heading over to the website, thecryptoverse.show. If you click on the green button, courses, you can sign up for any one of my online courses, anywhere from how to trade cryptocurrencies, blockchain security essentials, crypto exchange mastery, 21 fast track ways to make and save money with Bitcoin, and ins and outs of how blockchain technology works. You can check that out, or you can go over to the blue button, support the show, and that's where you'll end up on Patreon. And here, if you watch the little 4-minute trailer, you'll see me walk through another systems model, which explains to you how pledging support to the Cryptoverse on Patreon gets you cryptocurrency rewards. So I'll say no more about that. You can check that out for yourself. But right now, whatever it works out that whatever you're pledging in support on Patreon, you're roughly getting about 60% of that back in accumulated cryptocurrency rewards. So watch the trailer and explain exactly how that works. But that's all I got for you today. I'll be back with the next episode of the Cryptoverse. So until then, it's me, Chris Coney, saying bye for now.